Okay, so getting back into our coverage over the X-Men, we're going to pick up with some good old Uncanny X-Men issue number 339. Now, with this issue alone, we're kind of sitting down and talking about the idea of what's going on with Havok post Onslaught, because when it came to Havok, as we all know, he was controlled by Dark Beast. And of course, you had Dark Beast try to work for Onslaught, but also use Havok as the way to help on Onslaught. But with the idea of now Onslaught no longer being around and Dark Beast being defeated, you now have Havok being able to think on his own, but also go in a completely different direction than he used to when it comes to working with the X-Men, but also working alongside with X-Factor as well. Except before we were able to properly sit down and talk about that when it comes to Havok, in getting into the opening pages of this issue, we do pick up with Spider-Man. Now, this is Spider-Man arriving at the school of Charles Xavier. Now, for Spider-Man, he has fought alongside with the X-Men many times. But of course, there have been a few times where he has not run into every single member of the X-Men. So of course, when he does arrive at first, he is confronted by Bishop. And for Peter, he's kind of like, wait a second. I know Beast, Wolverine, Jean Grey, Cyclops, but I have no idea who you are. Now, for Bishop, he has no idea who Spider-Man is, because for Spider-Man, he was able to pass all the different defenses the school has very easily. Now, you do have Bishop try to fight against Spider-Man, but of course, you do have the rest of the X-Men arrive to explain things to Bishop, like, hey, this guy right here, he's good. His name, Spider-Man, he's on our side. Now, the reason why you have Spider-Man here is because to warn the X-Men what J. Jonah Jameson is up to, because we have seen this in earlier issues where when it came to JJ, he believed that he should go out of his way to dig up information on Graydon Creed because he hates the idea of Creed running for president on a hate campaign. And so his main goal is to figure out why in the world does Graydon Creed hate mutants so much for. Now, with all that being said, is Peter telling the X-Men that, but you have Jean Grey realize that she was able to read the mind of Peter without trying. It's kind of like her powers are acting on their own. But now we have to shift over to X-Factor, really more Mystique and also Forge. Now, as you all know, for Graydon Creed, he is the son to both Sabretooth and also Mystique. And so right now, you have Mystique watching CNN and she sees her son on the television right now being that guy who's just trying to win the chance to be president. But she knows her son is truly evil and hates the idea of mutants, his own mother, his own father, and matter of fact, his brother and sister as well, Nightcrawler and Rogue. But either way, for Mystique, while she's watching TV, she recognized that Bobby Drake is there with Graydon Creed as well, that he had officially went undercover. Now, the following day, we do pick up with the X-Men telling JJ as he's getting on a flight. Now, for Beast, he kind of feels like there's no way that JJ will notice he's on the plane with him. But the thing is, Beast around his time in Marvel Comics is the most recognizable character on the team. So, of course, for JJ, he knows when he's being followed. He's kind of like, oh, you guys are now following me because, well, that means I'm getting very close to figuring out what's going on with Graydon Creed. Now, for Beast, he's not alone. He has some backup. That backup would be Cyclops. But Cyclops is also not alone. He also has backup, but on the Blackbird. And that'll be Storm and, of course, Joseph. And as we all know, Joseph is having a hard time figuring out if he is Magneto or not. But when it comes to Joseph, with him having no idea about his past, he wants to know more about Cable and also Scott Summers. And so for Storm, she's all like, okay, sit down and buckle in because it's a long story when it comes to Cable and Cyclops and also Jean Grey. But then we pick up with a character known as Nick. Now, when it comes to Nick, he's in London right now. And the thing is, he has information about Graydon Creed. So, of course, this is him right now trying to meet up with JJ to give that info over to Jonah. So the question is right now, will he be able to meet up with Jonah to give that information? But getting back over to the X-Men, you have the X-Men right now just on the plane chilling. But then out of nowhere, the plane is attacked by a new version of Brotherhood of Mutants. Of course, that would be led by Havok. You see, like I said earlier, when it came to Havok, he was being controlled by Dark Beast, who was working with Onslaught. Once you had Onslaught be defeated and Dark Beast was also defeated, Havok was technically free, but he wanted to own his villain image. And the reason why? To be more proactive, to help out the mutant race, to kind of move away from what Charles and also X Factor were basically doing. And so this is him saying like, this is me right now being proactive as a way to help out the mutant race by going after JJ. Because again, for JJ, he's going after Graydon Creed, but it's Havok saying like the mutant race does not need your help at all when it comes to going after different people who are trying to hurt us. Now, there is more to the plan of Havok here. Unfortunately, we're not really told the whole complete idea of his plan in this one particular story. But you do have the X-Men begin to battle against Havok, really more Cyclops versus Havok. But as the battle goes on, it's really more of Havok trying to express to Cyclops that he's no longer that little brother that was always being, overshadowed by Cyclops, or that person on the X-Men, or that leader of X Factor, that this is him right now trying to do things different that he believes that will actually work. And so you do have Havok being able to teleport away. But once he does, you have Storm say Cyclops. To Storm, she believes that once again Havok has been mind controlled by somebody else. But for Cyclops, having that small conversation with his brother while they were fighting mid-air really shows Cyclops like, okay, yeah, that's no longer my brother who's being controlled by somebody else. This is an Alex Summers who finally has free will to do whatever he wants to do as a way to help out the mutant race. Now, we also have to remember that Joseph is there as well. And for the world, they believe that Joseph is Magneto, even though for Joseph, he does not remember anything from his past. And so once you do have Joseph go out of his way to save the plane that was attacked by Havok in the Brotherhood of Mutants, well, you have JJ begin to freak out like, okay, Beast, I know you're part of the X-Men, right? But like, have y'all recruited Magneto? Like, maybe for y'all's own image, you should not go out of y'all way to recruit evil mutants like freaking Magneto over there. But this particular issue does end on the note where we do see that Nick, the reporter, who's supposed to meet up with JJ in a few hours, had just got killed off by Bastion. Because for Bastion, let's not forget, he's right now trying to get his whole Operation Zero Tolerance kicked off. And to get it officially kicked off, he needs Graydon Creed by his side to actually get it going. And so he killed off Nick as a way to hide the dark past of Graydon Creed. But now we have to shift over to X-Men issue number 59. Now, when we do, the opening pages of the storyline, it's really more of us picking up with Scott Summers right now at the movies, and he's currently watching a classic movie, a good old classic black and white movie. But for Scott Summers, it's really more of him just trying to use this as a time to get away from all the different things that were going on with the X-Men, Onslaught, Charles Xavier getting arrested, Scott Summers now in charge of the entire school. And so it's him right now trying to use the movies as a way to get some peace and quiet, but you didn't have Jean Grey appear. Now for Jean Grey, she read the mind of her husband and she knew where he was going. So you had Jean Grey basically follow the man. And so for Jean Grey, she wants to know, like, is Scott upset about the fact that what happened with his brother Alex? And does he want to talk about it? But really for Scott Summers, he's kind of like, no, I don't want to talk about anything going on with my brother at the moment. This time is my peace and quiet time. But as we do switch back over to the school of Charles Xavier, we do pick up with Hercules fighting against Bishop. Now, it's not really like, okay, here comes Hercules and he's right now attacking the school of Charles Xavier. It's really more of, this is Hercules right now coming here to get some answers about what exactly happened to the Avengers. Because when it came to Onslaught, Hercules was not there. And the thing is, in the past, Hercules was a member of the Avengers. And so he arrived back on Earth. He just found out that the Avengers are no longer around. And so his goal right now is to figure out what exactly happened, but to also find the surviving members. So of course, he does see Beast because Beast was an old member of the Avengers, but you also have Beast being able to give Hercules the quick rundown about exactly what happened when it came to Onslaught in the Avengers and the Fantastic Four. But you also have him say, you know what, I'm kind of trying my best to regroup with the last few members of the Avengers. Who else is here besides you, Beast? And that would be Quicksilver. But let's not forget that for Quicksilver, he's also dealing with a major loss in his life because out of all the Avengers, you also had the Inhumans go into Onslaught as well. And of course, they were transported over to the Heroes Reborn universe. And so because of that, for Quicksilver, he lost Crystal, his wife, the mother to his child, Luna. And so for Quicksilver, he's kind of wondering, like, how can he move on with his life? How is he able to keep things going for him, but also for his daughter? And so for Logan, Wolverine, he comes in a great time to give some good advice to Quicksilver. He's like, listen, dude, I also lost someone I love too. I lost Mariko, but I kind of realized something, that the dead would want us to keep living on for them, but also for ourselves as well, and not be brought down by their death. But it's also Logan saying, like, you have a daughter. You have to keep things together, not just for you, for her as well, continuing to live on for that little girl. And you didn't have Quicksilver just run away. Now we do shift over to Joseph. Now remember, Joseph is just a younger version of Magneto who just appeared out of nowhere but does not remember anything from his past. And so when it comes to Joseph right now, he has been in the computer room just looking over data that has been collected over time about Rogue. And the reason why, because for Joseph, with him not remembering anything from his past, but hearing all these horrible things, he's kind of like, okay, I gotta turn my life around. One of those things you try to do right now is to fix Rogue, to help her learn how to control her abilities. And so for Joseph, he believes he found the key to help her out. But the thing is, he tells Quicksilver that. And for Quicksilver, he gets very angry because for Magneto and Quicksilver, these two characters never really had a strong relationship with one another. And matter of fact, it's Quicksilver blaming his father for ruining his life and ruining other people's lives. Now, at first, for Joseph, he does get upset about the idea that for Quicksilver, he would bring that up. But then you have Joseph realize why it was brought up, because technically, this is his son, and he ruined his life. Now we do shift back over to Cyclops and Jean Grey, and I kind of like this a lot because it's adding on to the past of Cyclops, but also kind of building on that bond between Cyclops and, well, Charles Xavier, because you have Cyclops basically tell us that there was a time where he would just go to movies and see all these extraordinary people doing great things for themselves, but also for people around them. And so for Scott, he always dreamed the idea of doing the same thing as the people he saw in the movies. And so when it came to Charles Xavier saying, like, hey, you have great power, and that power can be used to help out other people, just like that, it was Scott being able to build that bond with Charles Xavier, because for Charles, he took Scott out of the darkness he was in, and of course, brought him to a brighter side of life. Now, we also get a quick reminder about Bobby Drake and also Sam Guthrie, because these two characters had officially went undercover to work for Graydon Creed and kind of figure out what's going on with him, with the idea of the man trying to run for president. But when it came to Bobby Drake, he found a fax, and the fax is talking about his father Bobby Drake's father. And the reason why, because in an earlier storyline, while you had Graydon be interviewed by Trish Tilby, you had Bobby's father stand up to Graydon, basically saying like, what he's doing is completely wrong. You're trying to become president to get rid of one particular race of people. But the question is then, when do you stop? Because you're saying now it's just mutants. But then down the road, you could say somebody else's race or religion and so on and so on. But anyways, when it comes to Bobby Drake's father, it does seem like he's being held right now. And so for Bobby, he wants to help his dad out. Now for Sam, he was assigned to go get Graydon for the next part of his campaign. And so when you have Sam locate Graydon, he realized having some kind of conversation. But once you have Sam call out Graydon's name, you have Graydon close the door, hiding the fact of who he was talking to. Now for Sam, he does try to have a conversation with Graydon. And the thing is, for Sam, he believed that Graydon's parents were dead. Now, as we all know, that's not the case. That Graydon Creed's parents are alive and, well, I guess because having Mystique and also Sabretooth, they're his parents. And so for Sam, he's kind of like, wait a second. I thought your parents were dead, but now you're telling me they're not dead. And the reason why you're trying to run for president is because, well, of them. And so for Sam, we get the idea that he does not know, like most characters, that Mystique and Sabretooth are the parents of Graydon Creed. But you have this issue begin to wind down a tad bit. And what I mean by that statement is that you do have Joseph go to apologize to Pietro about his path with one another. But the thing is, for Pietro, he knows like that apology is not really meaningful, because technically for Joseph here, he does not remember doing anything bad to Quicksilver at all. And so Pietro is saying like, maybe one day your apology will actually mean something down the road. And so you didn't have Quicksilver leave with Hercules. But this particular issue does close with the idea of Jean Grey and Scott Summers leaving the movies, but also kind of realizing that they have one another to rely on when it comes to handling different types of situations in their lives that'll be coming up very soon because, well, they're heroes. They're the X-Men. And so now we jump back over to Uncanny X-Men issue number 340. Now, with this issue right here, we're picking up with the possibility of Bobby Drake leaving the X-Men. Really, it is him leaving the X-Men. And the reason why, because as we get into the opening pages of the storyline, we're picking up with Bobby Drake visiting his father, who's in the hospital. And the reason why, because Graydon Creed had attacked his father. But the question is, what exactly happened? Now, before we are able to actually sit down and see what happened to Bobby's father, we jump over to Sam Guthrie, the other person right now who went undercover when it came to Graydon Creed's campaign. Now, when it comes to Sam Guthrie, we see him right now wanting to pay a visit over to, well, Graydon Creed. But he has new bodyguards like, no, listen, boss man said he wants to be left alone. But then at the very last second, you didn't have Graydon say, you know what, guys, let Sam in because I want to have a conversation with him as well. But as we do transition back over to Bobby Drake, you have Bobby explain to Storm what exactly happened to his father. So of course, this leads into a flashback. Now, with this flashback, it's really more of us seeing that when it came to Bobby hanging out with Graydon Creed, you had Graydon ask Bobby about a question about fathers. If fathers acted a certain way, will their sons behave the same way as their fathers? Now, the reason why you had Creed ask that question, because as soon as the plan had landed, you had Creed direct Bobby over to a certain location where, of course, Bobby had found his father badly beaten. And then you had Creed just fly away his plane with the rest of his crew. And so for Bobby, he's kind of like, okay, now I know why my father was beaten for, because this man right here stood up against you. But once you learn about him, you were hoping to get information out of him about me, X-Men better known as Iceman. And the reason why you have Creed just going around asking folks about their fathers, because again, his father is Sabretooth. And as we all know, they don't have a good connection with one another. This man is trying his best to wipe out the mutant race because of his parents, Mystique and Sabretooth. And so while you do have Creed ask Sam about his father in the present day, for Sam it's kind of like, man, my dad was a great guy, but unfortunately he was always working. And with him always working, it led to him dying. But either way, him and I are very close to one another. And so for Graydon, he can't relate to Sam because again, him and Sabretooth are not close at all to one another. We do get a couple of pages where you do have Bobby Drake's father explain why he went after Graydon Creed for. And the reason why, because he was trying his best to protect his family. He kind of felt like when it came to Graydon, he was really trying to attack his family, come after his, but also other families across the nation. And so he had to be that one person to stand up against Graydon, which of course he did. And so you do have the story kind of shift over to the idea of Bobby saying goodbye to the X-Men. But before we're able to see, like, Iceman leaving the team, we do see that for Graydon Creed, he used Mr. Drake as bait to pull other mutants to the hospital, because outside in the parking lot of the hospital, we do pick up with, Wolverine finding some guys who were plotting to attack the rest of the X-Men while they're inside the hospital. But now we have reached that point where we see Bobby Drake informing the X-Men that he will no longer be with them. Like, for right now, he needs to be with his father and mother, especially his father right now, as his dad is trying to recover. But this is where we're going to end today's comic book video. So please leave me a like down below and subscribe. But guys, see y'all next time. Later.